So what's causing all the billionaires and smartest macroeconomists around the world to frantically switch all of their life savings and wealth out of dollars or fiat currencies that aren't backed by anything and put their wealth into forms of money such as gold and Bitcoin? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that these forms of money are stores of value that can't have their supply artificially increased or just printed like the fiat currencies that have an endless supply. Stick around to the end of the video as we explore what all this printing or quantitative easing is going to have on the value and the purchasing power of your superannuation or even your money in the bank. But first, we're going to hear from one of the most recent billionaire CEOs, Michael Saylor, who came to that kind of epiphany that his money was being melted away as central banks printed into oblivion. And then what has caused him to recently come out and buy $425 million worth of Bitcoin, declaring that it is simply a better form of money than fiat currency or dollars backed by nothing.
You know, I come to the horrifying conclusion that I'm sitting on a $500 million ice cube that's melting. It's melting at 6% in a good year. And for the last decade, it's been melting at 6%. Okay, I was there, but I could ignore it. In good times, you ignore the 6%. But then when you have to actually get educated on macroeconomics, you realize it's been melting at 6%. And then you realize that this year it's melting 25%. And then you have to look out over the next 3 years and ask the question, is it going to continue to melt at 20% a year for the next 3 years? Is it going to melt at 15% or 10%? And now here's an epiphany, right? I mean, if that's not enough, right? I mean, like, there's no comparison between losing 80 to 90% of your money versus not losing any of your money. There's no comparison. But here's another epiphany. I'm an aeronautical engineer from MIT. I studied spaceship design. I studied aircraft design. I studied building design. Once you understand Bitcoin, right, you have anxiety about being short. Once you understand it,
completely terrified of not having enough.
And if that's the case, then if you're running $10 billion of money, you go take $1 or $2 billion of it, or $3, or you just buy it all. Like, I mean, don't you sit around? I sit around, I'm trading this Bitcoin, Raul, and to buy this much, you can't buy it in a minute or an hour. You can't even buy it in a day. When I'm in the market, I'm buying Bitcoin 4 days in a row, every minute.
Are you doing it yourself?
Well,
you haven't given it to anybody else?
Okay, so the point is, this is an example somewhere everybody's really afraid. Everybody says, oh, that's a really ballsy, risky, you know.
They're all long themselves.
They're all long Bitcoin.
It's the same in the hedge fund world. Paul Tudor Jones goes, you're the Paul Tudor Jones of the corporate world. Paul was the first guy to stand up and go, well, I bought Bitcoin in my fund. Well, guess what? Every bloody fund manager I know owns some Bitcoin already.
And
guys, this is absolutely massive news. Why are all the billionaires and smartest investors around the world all flocking to get into Bitcoin? Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, a massive tech company listed on the NASDAQ in the United States, sent absolute shockwaves across the world only about 4 to 5 weeks ago when he became the first publicly listed company to come out and declare, hey, look, we're going to spend, instead of having $250 million of cash sitting on our balance sheet, we're going to go out and buy Bitcoin. Now, they became the first publicly listed company to come out and announce that they were buying Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And as soon as they announced that, back in July, 2 other companies followed suit and done the same thing, said they were going to buy 40% of their total net assets and denominate that in Bitcoin. But we've had news come out in the last 2 days. Michael Saylor was not done there, ladies and gentlemen. That $250 million purchase, he said, hey, look, we're going to go balls deep. We're buying another $170 million worth of Bitcoin, guys. And what is even crazier about that decision is that the market has validated his decision. The same week that stocks have been crashing, guys, as you can see here, this is the chart of MicroStrategy, their stock price. And as you can see, their price was relatively stable after it recovered after the health situation crash earlier in March, or supposed health situation crash. And as you can see, after that first announcement when they said, look, we don't want to hold this worthless cash anymore as we're afraid of inflation devaluing the purchasing power of that cash, which we keep touching on this channel here, guys. They went out and they bought Bitcoin, a form of money that has a limited supply. So right here, where I've got this first arrow, that's where they first announced that they were going to buy the $250 million worth of Bitcoin. Their stock price pumps 23%. They came out 2 days ago, same announcement. Hey, we're doubling down. We're taking our total investment into Bitcoin up to $425 million. Right? They bought another $170 million worth of Bitcoin. Their stock price again jumps another 23%. Now, what's even crazier than that, guys, is what's going to happen when all of these larger companies around the world start seeing this, okay? There's only ever going to be 22 million Bitcoins ever created, and you've got Michael Saylor buying them up like they're hotcakes, and then you've also got Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. The Grayscale Bitcoin Trust now owns somewhere around 400,000 Bitcoins, which is over 2% of the total Bitcoin circulating supply. And they're the only kind of avenue for institutional investors to get exposure to Bitcoin as an asset class. And let me tell you guys, those institutional investors are stepping up their demand for Bitcoin because they know we are in the early stages of what's going to be a massive bull run over the next coming years in the Bitcoin price. So as you can see, Grayscale has had to step up their buying of Bitcoin. They have bought 140,000 Bitcoins since the Bitcoin halving earlier in May of 2020. Now, I'm no mathematician, but the miners have only mined somewhere around 108,000 Bitcoins since the halving in May, and Grayscale alone has bought 140,000 Bitcoins. And then you've got these rogue investors like Michael Saylor having that light bulb moment, as he described, and waking up to the fact that he was sitting on a $500 million melting ice cube of cash. That's how he described the $500 million, just literally melting away into nothing as central banks fire up those big money printers and dilute the value of cash and savings.
I just came to this horrifying realization. I was sitting on a $500 million ice cube, and it was melting at least 10% a year, but probably 20% a year. 10%.
Characterize everything that the Fed has done this past week as essentially flooding the system with money?
Yes, exactly.
And there's no end to your ability to do that?
There is no end to our ability to do that.
Is the Fed just going to print money?
That's literally what Congress has told us to do. That's the authority that they've given us, to print money and provide liquidity into the financial system. And that's how we do it. We create it electronically, and then we can also print it with the Treasury Department, printed.
So Michael Saylor said, hey, look, I might buy 38,000 Bitcoins. So you've got Michael Saylor, who's got 38,000 Bitcoins. You've got the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust buying 140,000 Bitcoins. This is just since the halving in 2020, guys. And the miners are only producing 108,000 Bitcoins. We are literally running out of Bitcoins, guys. Bitcoin is the scarcest asset ever created. Never had a form of money with a fully limited capped supply. 21 million, remember that one. So let's have a look at what the Bitcoin price has done since the halving alone, only about 6 months ago now. We've rallied 35%. Even after we've had that first dump in our bull run, guys. You can see we got that large 20% correction in the Bitcoin price, which we covered here on the channel, and we said buy the effing freaking dip, okay, guys? Because when you step back, these are the dips you want to buy. Long-term viewers of the channel would know that we've done some pretty in-depth analysis of the Bitcoin halving. And what we're seeing at the moment is looking very similar to what we saw in 2016. We broke out of our consolidation range. You get that first bull run move. You get that first move up, that first rally. And then you get that little 20 to 30% shakeout before things go absolutely parabolic, okay? Here's your 20% shakeout. We'll zoom in on that one, guys. You get your 20 to 30% correction before things go absolutely parabolic. 36% correction. And then, well, you can see what happened after that, guys. We went nuts. And if you have a look at that one in a on a linear chart, because this is log, this is smoothed out. Let's see what it looks like when you go on a linear chart. Look at that. Bitcoin price rallied from what, $200 or $500 to $20,000 in a year. Boy, that's a bull run, guys, and that's what you're about to see in 2020, especially when you have 3,500 publicly listed companies with $5 trillion of cash, okay? That's a $5 trillion melting ice cube, as Michael Saylor would put it. What do you think's going to happen when they decide and have that light bulb moment and decide to put that into Bitcoin? Let's hear from Michael Saylor himself on a recent interview he done on YouTube yesterday.
I'll pay an extra whatever, but stop this thing. I'm holding it for 100 freaking years, right? It's like, I'm not the day trader guy that's worried about it. The other point, right, that's not lost upon me is there's 3,500 publicly traded companies. There's $5 trillion in their treasuries, and it's all melting. And yeah, at some point, you have a fiduciary obligation to not lose the money. Okay?
Almost, a very significant part of my liquid net assets. Outside my properties and shareholdings and stuff, in Real Vision or whatever, it's Bitcoin is the bet.
I said the other day, I said, for this is not a speculation, nor is it a hedge. This is a deliberate corporate strategy to adopt the Bitcoin standard. That's what we're doing, right? And I think,
guys, if those clips don't make you bullish on Bitcoin, I don't know what will. That first interview was one Michael done with Anthony Pompliano over on the Pomp podcast. The second was an interview he done with Raoul Paul at Real Vision. Both amazing resources that produce amazing content. I've learned a truckload from both of those guys, so go and check those guys out. But as Michael was saying, it's very easy to kind of ignore Bitcoin if you're under the illusion that your money is not broken and it's working to serve you. But once you have that realization that that money is broken and it is just draining your value, and you go down that Bitcoin rabbit hole, there is no turning back, guys. Once you see it, there is no unseeing it, okay? For Michael, that realization came when he said that he realized he was sitting on a $500 million melting ice cube of fiat currency, okay? And that's what sent him down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And for these people that are living in unfortunate circumstances around the world as their local currencies fail them, whether it's the people in Argentina with the Argentinian peso, or Chile, or Colombia, or Egypt. As you can see, guys, as they realize that their local currency has failed them, when they go down to the grocery store and the price of their food and groceries has doubled or tripled as opposed to previous weeks or months, they too go down that realization that, hang on a minute, our money may be broken too. And as you can see by the volumes on these charts, guys, Bitcoin adoption is surging in these local countries as their fiat currencies fail. So they too are taking Michael's lead and adopting their very own little Bitcoin standard. Okay, so who is this Michael Saylor, this rogue Bitcoin investor, guys? So he's actually one of the smartest and most successful technology entrepreneur investors of all time, guys, okay? He's built a number of multi-million-dollar technology and software companies back in the 90s and the early 2000s. He's won a number of awards, including Software Entrepreneur of the Year and one of the smartest innovators under 35. But before he got into business and technology, Michael Saylor went to MIT and got a degree in aeronautical engineering, guys. The dude's a freaking rocket ship scientist, okay? But even a guy as smart as Michael Saylor, okay, someone who was selling internet domain names back in the early 1990s when people didn't even know what a computer was, okay, that's how far ahead of his time he was. He's made a living by spotting these technology trends early and getting into them early before anyone else can spot them. But even someone as smart as him and has such a great understanding of what technology is, he couldn't understand Bitcoin before he really went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, guys. This here is actually a tweet from Michael Saylor back in 2013. Can you see that one, guys? He actually says, Bitcoin's days are numbered. It seems like just a matter of time before it suffers the same fate as online gambling. But as we touched on in that interview before, guys, he seems to have changed his tune quite a bit. And it's only when you realize that your money is broken and that the central banks are siphoning your wealth away, okay, they're stealing your money through inflation. It's only when you have that kind of, you have that moment and you have the realization that your money is broken and it's not working for you. For Michael, as we touched on, it was when he discovered he was sitting on that $500 million melting ice cube of fiat currency. Now, so Michael's only been a Bitcoiner this year. He only went down the rabbit hole this year, okay, guys? And now he's saying things like this about Bitcoin.
So I started studying it, but then I realized, here's what I realized in short order. Bitcoin's a $200 billion asset. Bitcoin is a hive of cybernetic hornets doing the bidding of Mother Nature, protected by a wall of encrypted energy, right? That's what I saw once I started to dig it. It's a living cybernetic hive creature with a wall of encrypted energy, and Lord help the guy that tries to shove his hand into that hornet's nest and steal from it, right? And I thought, that's interesting. Now, the gold standard, good idea in the 19th century, right? The best idea you could have in the 19th century. But, I mean, just like wooden ships. Pretty good idea to have wooden ships if you're the British Empire, if that's the best you can have, Now, along comes Bitcoin, cryptocurrency.
Yep, guys, Michael's falling down that Bitcoin rabbit hole. And trust me, the further you fall and the more you learn about Bitcoin, the crazier it gets, okay, guys? Bitcoin is really revolutionary. Let's just leave that one there for today. And we'll leave the video here for today for the purposes of trying to keep this relatively short. We'll leave part 1 here. We'll come back tomorrow with part 2, where we discuss what is going to happen to the purchasing power and the value of fiat currency, which is what is in your bank. I reckon the money in your bank is denominated in dollars, and I reckon what your governments and central banks are promising to pay your superannuation fund is in dollars, guys. Diluted, devalued dollars, okay? They're increasing that slice of the pie the more they print of that money, and your sliver of that pie is remaining the same. So tune in tomorrow as we explore the different money markets, which we're looking at on the screen at the moment. We're going to look at what $10 trillion worth of gold value flooding into the Bitcoin price could do. That is the size of the gold market, guys. Now let's have a little look at the size of Bitcoin. absolutely tiny. But we're going to check that one out in part 2, as well as many other things. Leave a comment down below in the comment section and let me know whether you want to see more of Michael's crazy articulations about the Bitcoin rabbit hole, or whatever you guys want to see in the next video. Leave it below. If you learnt anything, hit the like button. Until tomorrow, stay tuned and thanks again. See you guys.